Let me know where you're tuning in from this evening. We are doing a renters reform webinar this evening, so if you've got any questions or thoughts around that, use the chat box. I'm going to make it quite interactive this evening. So, where are you based? Let's start with that, and then we'll start the webinar proper. Okay, so we've got people in Peterborough, me too, currently, Coventry, Shropshire. Oh, it's moving too fast now. Hi, Amanda. Sophia, hello. Where have we got? Cornwall, Kent, Manchester, Tottenham, London, Devon, Chelmsford, Bury St Edmunds, Leeds. Oh my word, from everywhere. Okay, Newcastle. Good stuff. So everyone is tuning in from all over the UK. That's good because the Renters Reform Bill is predominantly going to affect those of us in the UK. So that's what we're going to look at this evening. And we are now at 7 o'clock. So I'm going to start by saying warm welcome to everyone. Hello. I've gone rogue. I'm sitting in an armchair in the office in Progressive because I want to make it quite conversational this evening. I want us to look at the Renters Reform Bill. As you know, that's what our main focus of this evening's webinar, and I'd love to know your thoughts on it. I think I'm a little bit unique in that my thoughts are quite different to many people's. So we're going to be looking at the common mistakes of people's reviews of the Renters Reform Bill. We're going to be looking at how we can use it to future-proof your property portfolios. We're also going to look at the hidden opportunities that have actually come along with the Renters Reform Bill, and then we're going to look at how those smart investors are using it to actually scale bigger than ever. So that's a little bit of an overview on what we're going to be focusing on this evening. I would love for you to get involved in the chat box to let us know your thoughts on the Renters Reform Bill. What are your thoughts on it? Do you love it? Do you hate it? Are you scared of it? Are you excited by it? Are you, in fact, let's find out where you're at in the world of property, because that will obviously dictate how your feelings are currently. So if you are brand new to property investing, not yet officially started, you're thinking about getting started, you're doing your research, please put a number one in the chat box. We're going lazy today. Okay, so we've got a lot of number ones coming in. Okay. Oh. Haven't got a clue. That's all right today. Oh, that's what this evening's all about. Don't like the sound of the Renters Reform Bull. Was that a typo, or are you calling it the Renters Reform Bull? Did you mean to say Bill? I need to ask that question. Who was that? Saf. Okay, Steve, hello. Typo, although, quite accurate, some may say. Okay, so we've got a lot of newbies. No knowledge and terrified. Don't be terrified. I'm going to kind of decode it. That's what this evening's webinar is all about. 10 buy-to-lets, needs polish up. Heathil is an interesting read, that is for sure. Okay, if you are not new to property, maybe you're established, you've got a handful under your belt, the Renters Reform is going to affect you. A number two in the chat box.
Yeah, can you?
Gives me a chance to keep having a drink. Okay, so Carol, Tanya, Vicky,
I can
Hamza.
hear you clearly.
Michael. Okay, we've got tons in the two. So we've got quite a mix between one and two thus far.
Hello.
Okay. And then those of you who are really experienced, I'm talking, 10 plus properties, maybe even 5 plus properties, I suppose, as they may have been accumulated over a number of years. Please put number 3 in the chat box if that's you. You've got quite a few properties. And again, I'd love to know your thoughts around it. Use that chat box. I'm going to keep tapping into it as often as I can do, just to get your thoughts in regards to it. Okay, we've got predominantly 1 and 2 in the chat box. There's only a handful of you who class yourself as experienced. So Graham, Grant, Heath. Yeah, me too, Heath. I did HMOs in the past. I've got rid of those ones, but I do have a portfolio of buy-to-let. I am also aware that there are definitely names in the chat box of people that I recognise, whether that be from coming to one of our multiple streams events. We held one just last weekend, and I recognise quite a few of you on here, names wise from there, but I'm also aware that there are definitely names on there that I don't know. So I suppose I should do a little introduction to myself, in case you are wondering who this random woman is on your screen. So I am Tony Gargan. I have been around Progressive for just over 10 years now. Oh, bless, I'm getting nice comments in the chat box. That always goes down well. I've been in Progressive for around 10 years now, having come along to my very first event in January 2015. That being said, I was actually a landlord from 2007. So I
Yeah,
started investing in 2007, but
I'm
it
not
was
sure if you can hear
completely
muffled
unintentional,
background. What it is like
and I did
two
not do it
webinars
very
going
well.
on. I'm
So
recording them,
the
and
abridged
I
version
plug in
is
a head.
I bought a
I plug
house
in headphones
in
and record
Chester.
it,
I was
but
living in
you
Liverpool.
may hear a
Bought a
bit
house in
because
Chester because I
it's
was
too loud
fed
here.
up commuting to and from work, so I'd rented a property with my then partner. And
Okay.
anyone who's heard me speak before will know that I regularly say that there are quite a few experts who tell you what you should be doing when
Okay.
they're not actually
I used to
qualified to do
own
so. And so
several
because I was renting a
websites.
property,
It's
this
a bit
was
of a professional,
2007,
and the last one
I
I got
took
it
the
in
advice and guidance from people
2003.
who were not
No,
qualified to
sorry,
give me advice
22,
and guidance.
23.
Every time
I'm
I'd
gonna say.
said I've moved from,
And consequently,
people would say,
my
"Oh,
my
where have
credit
you
is a bit
bought?"
damaged.
No, 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 I'm rented. I'm just renting in the centre of
So
town, just a little
again,
tiny one bed
I'm trying to get
house.
back into
Oh,
property
you
again,
don't want to
mainly
rent.
deal sourcing and all that. But I
Renting's dead
eventually
money.
want to
And when you hear
own
something often
HMO,
enough, you
especially if
can
I
start to
like to
believe it.
live,
And so
especially
I'd
HMO,
heard it from so many
using a
people who
limited
rent
company,
it's dead
obviously.
money. Oh, you want to
Now,
buy? Oh, the market's good
I
for it
know
now.
even
And
within the
what
company, you still
I didn't know, well, I
check the
knew very
background
little.
with
I
the
was in my early
regulators.
20s
Our
and knew
credit is still
literally
gonna be
nothing
checked.
about property.
So
I
is there
just
a way
had
around that?
these
I'm
people,
repairing my
predominantly
credit at the
who were
moment. I'm trying to
older
clean
than
it
me,
up.
and
All
we
kind of
often take
things.
advice
It
from
might
people
take
who
some
are
time.
older than us because we're taught to
Another way
respect
is for
our
me
elders.
to
And so
introduce
loads of people were like, "Oh, why don't you buy?"
my daughter, who is gonna
And
be
so
18, to
I'd heard it quite a
maybe
bit.
use her
My
if
then
she's willing, and
boyfriend and
as good as
I
well, like a
decided that we
builder
would consider
portfolio
buying.
possible
Everyone's
for
saying we
her
should
anyway.
buy. Why don't we look
She's the
into
only
it?
one that's gonna inherit,
Be
so it's
careful
very
what you
good.
wish
But
for, because
without
what I
working,
did
she's
was
only
I
gonna
lived
be
right in the
18.
centre of Chester. Is there anyone
So
I'm from Chester, by the way? If you are, let me know in the chat box. I lived right in the centre of Chester, and I was renting this tiny little mews house, and it was right by,
there was
like,
a
you wouldn't have even known the
bankruptcy.
house existed. It was
There's a
right by the centre
bankruptcy
where you'd walk out
back
and you
in
go into the cross.
2015.
And so
I thought
we
it's
had a
all
very rare
cleared
day
now,
off
but
work,
still
and me and
affecting my
my then
credit. So I'm
boyfriend
gonna be
worked
back in that.
together. We
Why
decided
is it
that we would
still
just
here?
go and
It's
have a look.
undischarged.
Go and speak to some estate agents, see what the
And that
price
should
of
have been
properties
okay,
were
but
in the
it's
area.
still appearing.
And
So
long
I'm gonna
story
examine
short,
and
what happened
clean up
was that
this.
we walked into an
It's
estate
discharged
agent,
bankrupt, but
got
somehow the
ushered in to
record.
see the
So
in-house mortgage
and
broker,
then
which I now
obviously
know
we
was big
about
mistake number
15
one, but I didn't
outlets.
know anything about
Some
property
of them
then. And we were basically, long
you know,
story short, we went in to see the
get rid of
estate
them,
agent,
all
ushered
kind
in
of
to see the
problems
mortgage
there,
broker,
and that's
sent
also
home to pick up all of the relevant
surfaced in
documents, and
in my
walked out with
credit
an
file.
agreement in principle.
Now
But
I'm
this
just
was at the height of the
cleaning up my
market,
credit file at the moment, but that's
2007. Property prices were on the up. We got 100% mortgage with Northern Rock based on our salaries. We had good
which I
salaries,
prefer is
and we set about going to
Experian or
find
which
a
one you
house,
prefer?
which we then
Normally it's the best.
bought in the centre of Chester on 100% mortgage with Northern Rock. And
So by
then not
far.
only did we take out the full secured mortgage against the property at 100%, but the property that we decided to purchase was an ex-council house that a lovely family had lived in, but it was in need of a little bit of TLC. It had like a lilac bathroom, all the tiles were lilac. It had carpet in the bathroom up to the side of the bath, it was lilac. So it needed a little bit of work doing to it. So, on top of said secured loan, mortgage, Northern Rock offered us an unsecured loan on top, which we took because I knew nothing about property. Um, I'm giving you the abridged version. Basically, that was 2007, and then I split up with my then boyfriend. 2008, the crash happened, and I was stuck with a house in quite severe negative equity. And this was, early 20s, knew nothing about property. I've just split up with my boyfriend. I've now got this property that we paid this for, but is now worth this. And yeah, that was my first foray into property investing. And although I can say it with a smile on my face now, I
Okay.
categorically was not happy at the time. And in 2007,
Mhm.
2008, I became an accidental landlord. I became an accidental landlord, hating every second of it, and I also knew nothing about it, which is why I'm sharing with you what
But
the
definitely,
Renters Reform Bill
definitely
is
we're
this
using
evening, because
SPV.
you don't
We
know
will
what
not
you don't
use
know.
SPV
And so I
maybe
knew nothing about
directly.
property
Is that
investing. I didn't know
is
the
that okay?
legals around it. I didn't know that the house that I was renting out wasn't actually a house, it was an illegal multi-let
Yeah.
property. Effectively, I'd turned it into a HMO by taking three individuals and renting the rooms out to them just to be able to pay the bills. And yeah, it was a disaster. So although I have been a landlord since 2007, I don't class myself as a property investor until I came to Progressive, learned how to do it, and that was in 2015. So very different experience between 2007 and 2015. 2015, I've got to say, I wasn't willingly coming along to Progressive. I was actually dragged along by my husband to an event, and from that one event, I joined onto a masterclass, onto a mentorship program. And fast forward to now, we have built a portfolio predominantly of single buy-to-let properties. So I've done all of the strategies, and they all work, by the way. They all work if you do. We've done buy-to-let, blocks of apartments, buy refurbishment, refinance. We've done HMOs and serviced accommodation, etc. You know, rent to rent. We've done all of the different strategies. However, my preferred strategy is the simplest of all, which is the buy to let and buy refurb refinance strategy. And I know that many people will be fearful, and I'd love to know your thoughts actually around the Renters Reform Bill, around the legislative changes. I can actually see some opportunity, and that's what we're going to look at this evening. But my whole portfolio, we've been investing for over 10 years now. I say we because it's myself and my husband who own the property business and property portfolio together. And yeah, we've built quite a significant portfolio of single buy-to-let properties, blocks of apartments. And then for the last maybe 7 years now, we've also been buying portfolios from struggling and retiring landlords. Yeah, it's about 6 years. So yeah, that's a little bit about me. Just thought I'd best do an intro so that you all knew who it was that was sharing with you this evening. And what I'm also going to share with you is what we're going to be looking at is the common mistakes within the Renters' Rights Bill, and what people are perceiving as a problem that isn't necessarily a problem. We're going to look at future-proofing your portfolio. We're going to look at hidden opportunities, and we're going to look how to scale. If this is all sounding good, if you're ready and raring to go, give me some sort of affirmative or yes in the chat box. I'm going to keep having a drink. I've been on stage all day hosting our property mastermind, and so I have a very dry throat. Okay, we have a lot of yeses and hands raised. Okay, we've got some fabulous words in there. Yup. Affirmative. Love it. Okay, so let's break it down. I've just documented the 7 biggest things that are going to affect you, I say you, us, as landlords in the Renters Reform Bill. Oh, what a word, Martin, indubitably. First things first, the biggest one. In fact, you let me know in the chat box. What are your biggest concerns about the changes in the Renters Reform Bill? I suppose the first question should really be, have you read it? And this is where a lot of the fear lies with people, is that there are people who have not read it, and yet are still commenting on it. I've not read the Renters Reform Bill, but okay, like your honesty. Can't see my slides. I haven't put any slides up yet, Tonya. I'm not doing slides as yet because I want it to be conversational. I have got slides that I could show, but I'm going to talk it through first of all. Okay, so most of the things that are coming in are EPC. Okay, we'll talk about that can being kicked down the road. Someone who's not yet read it. Removal of no-fault evictions. Yes, Tanya, I fully expected that to be one of the biggest ones on there. Tenants being able to stay and potentially not pay. Hasn't that always been a potential, though? Not read it yet, not read it yet. Section 8 and the timings. Tenants given 2 months' notice to leave, even on a student tenancy. Stephen says I'd be good at mentoring. Thanks. I've got quite a few mentees. Oh, it's moving too fast for me to keep on top of. Troublesome tenants and can't get rid of. Yes, that's a really common one. Turning cash into digital currency. Yeah, Renters Reform Bill isn't really going to affect that. Database for landlords. I'm with you, Dave. That's probably one of my least favourite. It's interested to know where the opportunities. Well, are my perceived opportunities. You may agree or disagree, Sue. Court delays. Well, we've had those for the past God knows how many weeks, months, years. Increasing backlog in the courts. Yep. Not read it yet. Rent increase challenges. Hold that thought. When it's going to actually be law. Don't have any experience yet. Is it really different? Martin, I like what you're saying, Martin. I'm coming to you. New contracts, periodic tenancies. digital ID for the CEOs in the UK. Yeah, renters reform doesn't necessarily cover that, but there is a central database. Not scared, I'm in the progressive community. Love it, Mandagus. Pet ownership rights doesn't concern me. Rental increases and court delays. Let an agent and a landlord, loss of clients. Cheryl, hold that thought. Well, Cheryl, you may be. I should double check with you, Cheryl or Cheryl. Not read it yet. Not reletting for 12 months after notice given. Okay, let's dig deep. Let's start at the beginning in no particular order. Removal of section 21 no fault evictions. I've just put some notes up here so that I remember what I want to cover. Removal of section 21 no fault evictions is one of the most common things that I've heard people being scared of. And it is the case that we don't actually have a date for it yet. They met on the 8th of September. We're still waiting for an update. Met again on the 11th, still waiting for an update. So it will be coming in and it will be imminent. Section 21, and I get that people are scared. A big part of every single thing that I'm going to raise with you this evening is touted in the media as this is the end of the world. And don't get me wrong, there are challenges that we are going to face, but together we're going to rise. And I believe that actually most of it can be overcome. What I mean by that is, a lot of people have openly admitted that you've not read the Renters Reform Bill. I'm going to recommend that you read it. That's your first port of call, because there are some things that are open to interpretation, and a lot that is still yet to be formally decided. And we'll come to each of these points. The removal of Section 21 no fault evictions, though, is absolutely happening. But hand on heart, it is not a concern to me. And I know that a lot of people might think I'm just paying lip service, but I've been a landlord officially renting since 2007, so what's that? 18 years. Property investor properly for the last 10 plus years. And I have never needed to evict anyone
Well, thank you very much. Thank you.
for a Section 21. Here we go. Heath, I am with you completely. Only ever use Section 21 when someone is behind on the rent. And yet Section 8 still remains. So what we used to do, and I've done this with every tenant who's fallen behind on their rent and we've needed to threaten, which is usually just the way, getting my legs under the table, hang on, which is Section 21, no fault evictions being removed. We always used to issue whenever a tenant went into arrears, and it was usually just as a fear thing for them, is we'd have conversations first, and that I think is going to remain the same. The more you communicate with your tenants, the better. So having those conversations will lead to open communication, because quite often the tenant doesn't want to be in arrears. Now, don't get me wrong, there are definitely going to be some tenants who are bad tenants, and I've had some of those as well. I have been buying tenanted properties for the last 6 years or so, but I've only ever used a Section 21 notice twice, and it has been alongside a Section 8 notice. Section 8 notice still remain in place with very similar grounds, Section 8 being for rental arrears. That being said, those two tenants that have used Section 21, they were Section 21 and Section 8, both of the tenants in rent arrears. And I get that you might say that I'm lucky, but I didn't vet those tenants. My own tenants, I don't believe it's luck, I believe it's systems in place, and we're going to talk about those. But the ones that I inherited, two tenants in 10 years that we've had to evict. So I'm not concerned by Section 21. I am less concerned because we have very robust vetting systems, and what I mean by that is, going forward, any of you who are going to be renting out your properties, if you're using a letting agent, you want them to have the most robust letting systems that there are. If you are self-managing, you want that too. And we have been challenged by some letting agents who've said that our procedures for letting our tenants, for letting people let our properties is too stringent, but I don't believe there's such a thing as too stringent. I don't think it is luck that has led to me not being in a position where I've had lots of properties trashed. I believe it has been good vetting of tenants and good communication. Good vetting of tenants, I think you need your letting agent or you need to. And so we have really strict procedures in so much as we do affordability checks, we do credit checks, I take a home owning guarantor on every single one of my properties. And so because of that, and this is by the way, despite affordability, we've been challenged by some letting agents who've said, but the tenant's more than pass affordability. But I believe it is another layer of security in there because the home owning guarantor is usually a parent, a sibling, an employer, someone in some sort of position of authority, which therefore means that if a tenant doesn't pay or if a tenant is in breach of their contract, you can speak to the homeowner guarantor to say, payments aren't being made. Are you aware of this? The removal of Section 21 is more a concern if you've used it quite regularly. I'm going to ask in the chat box and I'll do my best to keep on top of it. How often, how frequently have you used Section 21s? I'm 10 years in and I've never used a Section 21 on its own. Never is coming up quite frequently. Never. Okay, so fear of the unknown is the great thing here. Never. Never had to use it since 2005. This is what I'm reading in the chat box. Never. So is it not the fear mongering? Is it not, okay, Cheryl, as a letting agent, when the client is selling, you can still do that. So although there is removal of Section 21, it's no fault eviction. So Section 21 still remains. I know you know this, Cheryl, but Section 21 still remains. It's the no fault eviction element, i.e. I want my property back to go and let it to someone at higher rate. I want my property back for whatever reason. If you want your property back to sell on a property, or if you want your property back to move into it yourself, you can absolutely still use it. Used it alongside the Section 8. Hi Manisha, yes, me too, alongside the Section 8, but Section 8 still remains, so you can still use Section 8 notices if your tenants are in rent arrears. Sheila says used it once in 14 years. Okay, so this is the first thing, is there's lots of fear mongering, but that fear mongering creates opportunity because there are going to be lots of people who are going to leave the market if they're landlords with one or two properties and kind of, oh, it scares me, it's not for me. Or there will be lots of people who are thinking, but they hear this. And again, honest admission, most people in the chat box haven't read the renters reform bill. So the fear mongering becomes, oh my God, have you heard this? Did you know that? Did you know this? If you want to move back into your property, you can still evict your tenant. If you want to sell on your property, vacant possession, you can still evict your tenant. But hand on heart, I've never put a tenant into a property that I plan to evict. It's only a problem for me if they become a problem tenant, and a problem tenant usually is because they've fallen into arrears. But they've usually fallen into arrears through no fault of their own. So I'm going to circle all of the way back to good vetting of the tenants, good communication, and taking homeowning guarantors and or rent protection, rent and legal guarantee protection. There are literally insurance policies in place so that if your tenant doesn't pay, you still are not financially affected. If all of this is making sense with the first thing that I'm mentioning, number one, Section 21, no fault evictions, please put a number one in the chat box. Okay, so there's loads of number one coming in there. Now, obviously, there are always going to be anomalies to this, but isn't there a risk in every single business setup? Isn't there still, a risk in every job that you take? Look, it's risky walking out into the road when you're going to cross over the road. So one, removal of Section 21 no fault evictions, not a concern if you vet your tenants really, really well. Number two, the second thing, again, these are in no particular order. Periodic tenancies, and we had someone mention earlier on, it has been stated that we will no longer have our 6-month, 12-month ASTs, assured short hold tenancies, and that tenants will automatically be placed onto a periodic tenancy, therefore meaning that they can give 2 months notice to move out of the property. And I say this with all the love in the world, but so what? Because now, actually, people don't look at the flip side to that, which is if you've put a tenant into your property on a 12-month tenancy agreement, you can't change the rent for those 12 months while they're in there. In addition to that, if they stop paying, then the Section 8 notice still remains. And in addition to that, we move on to rolling periodic anyway. So with the rolling periodic, once we've gone beyond a 6-month or a 12-month period, anyway, the fixed term AST currently in use, we're going to move on to periodic anyway. It's the same principle. And actually, if a tenant wants to move out, wouldn't you rather let them just move out and give you 2 months' notice than it be that you're stuck with them in a fixed term tenancy? Because I've had it where tenants have moved in and then needed a bigger property, changed their mind, etc. It happens very rarely, but they're in a 12-month fixed term and they are responsible for paying that for the end of the duration. But I've never enforced it because there is so much demand for rental properties now that you can um, allow a periodic tenancy. To mean by that is there's a notice period that they're going to have to give you, and there's notice period for you to give to them. um Lindsay's saying about the 4 months notice to 12 months notice to relet. Hold that thought, we haven't got there yet. But we'll get there. Okay, so we've got Manisha saying my ASTs are usually 3 months anyway. This doesn't bother me as they furnish the property themselves. It's more hassle and cost for them to move. Agreed. What else have we got? We've got loads of different views. You cannot legislate against a tenant inviting a new partner. What do you mean by that, John? Are you talking about someone else moving in? We can't legislate against it, but they have to go through a vetting process and they have to be documented down as an authorised, permitted occupier. So there's loads of things in place that can help and support us. What if you've paid a 1 month fee to the agent, then they leave in 2 months? Okay, so there are different views in regards to this, and interestingly, at exactly the same time, Cheryl's saying if you pay an agent to let it for 12 months, and then you can, and the tenant gives you notice, and totally agree. And so, therefore, we'll be very, very strategic in the way that we vet our tenancies, just like we are now. It's not changing the way we vet them. The tenant can give notice, but the reality is, even if a tenant doesn't give notice and they're in a fixed term AST, they could still just move out of the property. And most landlords aren't going to enforce and go through a legal process to get the tenant to pay the remaining duration. Let's say it's currently a 6 month AST. 2 months in, the tenant wants to move. Most people aren't going to enforce the 4 months. They might try and tell the tenant you can move out if you want to, replace the current tenant. But I want to vet my tenants. So yes, it's a concern. But is it a concern enough to make us go, well, I'm not going to invest in property any longer? Because there's going to be loads of people who leave the market because of that. And that's where the opportunity lies. There's going to be lots of landlords who say, oh, I'm paying agents to put a tenant into a property. They're then going to want to move in 2 months' time, and then we've got to pay again. I'm of the mindset if a tenant doesn't want to be there, I don't want them in that property anyway. Surely it's better for them to move. And I'm going to be honest, touch wood, our average tenancy, I'm finding wood, our average tenancy is over 5 years. So remembering that, yes, the Renters Reform Bill definitely supports tenants, and definitely doesn't favour the landlord. But if we're vetting people in the right way anyway, there is still a massive shortfall of properties in the UK. So most tenants aren't going to think, oh, I'm going to move into this property, I'm going to pay removal costs, I'm going to pay to furnish the place, I'm going to decorate it, and then 2 months later change my mind. Most tenants are going to be in a position where they're moving for that reason anyway. If this is making sense, and that one, we have two periodic tenancies already in place immediately after the 6 month or 12 month term ends, or 3 month in Manisha's case, that it's already periodic, so it's not a concern. And that two, if a tenant actually wanted to leave, why would we not want to just let them go and relet the property? If number two makes sense, give me a number two in the chat box. I've got people saying clear in number two. Look, I'm also not here to say if you don't love property, don't do it. It's that simple. If you decide after this evening's webinar that actually the Renters Reform Bill is horrific, you don't want to rent a property, not a problem. Row your own boat. If you decide that you are going to sell all of your properties, well, give me a shout. I'd love to buy them. I know and that might sound facetious, but I actually genuinely believe this is going to create a lot of opportunity. Remember, most people haven't even read the Renters Reform Bill. Most people haven't read all of the detail around it. I'm prattling on through because I'm half an hour in already and time is running very fast. And number three, in no particular order, rent increases only being able to occur once per year, and a ban on bidding. Good. You can currently only increase your rent once in a 12-month period anyway. No change. But it's being advertised as you can't rent increase and there's a ban on bidding. Well, I've never had people bid on my properties anyway, when we advertise properties, and this is what will happen, those of you who remain in the property world, those of you who continue to rent out your properties, will make sure that you advertise your properties at the highest possible rent that you are comfortable with and that the market dictates, i.e., we're not going to go way over and above what your current market rate is. We normally stay just ever so slightly under it. So rent increases only being able to occur once per year is not a concern because you can only increase your rent once per year anyway, which we do automatically as a matter of course, by the way. So I actually had a conversation with someone at our multiple streams of property income event this weekend just gone, who was in a big problem because they hadn't increased their tenants' rent annually, which now means the market rent is lower, which makes it difficult to sell on. It makes it difficult to massively increase it. So annual increases as a standard. And I think actually what's going to happen is that anyone who's doing rent reviews on the properties now, me included, we're reviewing the rents and we are increasing them to what is market rent to ensure that they stay around market rent, and we increase them once per year every year. However, the ban on bidding, I get, can be a concern for people, especially in those areas where the council are using private rented sector properties, because sometimes the council will bid on a property on behalf of the tenant. What do I mean by that? If they're struggling to, like, they'll support a tenant in paying a little bit of a higher rent. But the ban on bidding, I don't think is a bad thing. That might be selfish because we've never had really bidding wars on our properties. Instead of advertising at one rate and letting people fight it out, because I vet my tenants so well, and I am so stringent with it, that bidding wars would be irrelevant. Because wouldn't you agree that it's better to take a tenant at X rate of rental, the amount that you've advertised for, who passes all of your stringent rent checks, than to take a tenant who's bid the highest? I don't know your views on that. I'm just speaking from my own personal view, but I would rather have a tenant who we actually like, who we vetted, who we believe is going to stay for the course, who we think is going to look after the place. If number 3 is making sense, please put a number 3 in the chat box. Oh, there's lots of mixed views on this. It's coming in too thick and fast. I can't keep up. Glad, thank you all for getting involved. Rather have a tenant you like. I'm with you, Viv. Hello, lovely. Usually increase annually unless you have a really good tenant who pays regularly and on time. Then you increase on the second year to incentivise them to stay longer. That's where you and I differ, Manisha, because I will still increase the rent, but I'll increase it ever so slightly. It has been known where I've not wanted to increase the rent, i.e. they're an amazing tenant, but we just put it up by £5 or £10 or £25, still kind of just below the market rent or the highest market rent for the area. I do believe we should be rewarding people, but I also don't believe we should get people stuck in a poverty trap. For clarity, I bought a house where the market rent was over £600 and the tenant was paying less than £500. It's quite difficult to then get the tenant up to market rate. This was also a tenant who needed a bigger house. If they are needing a bigger house and we've kept them in what's known as the poverty trap because you've kept their rent low, and then they want to move out of your 2-bed to move to a 3-bed elsewhere, but they're paying really low market rent here, it's too big a jump to be in the position where they can then move to the 3-bed house. So you are better increasing the rent once per year to a reasonable rate, keeping it in line with market rent, even if you're only increasing it by £5, £10, £15, to get your client, which I call my tenants clients, to get your client acclimatised to the fact that there will be an annual rate rise no matter what. And you're often asked what's the percentage, etc. The percentages, it will potentially vary around market rent. And I know that there is a recourse on this, but it's currently in existence before the renters reform brings it in. A tenant can still argue the rent. If you try and rent increase and you do a section 13 notice to increase the rent on your tenant's property, Richard's saying, is this recording or live? It's live. It's 7:33 on Wednesday. So if you are renting to a tenant, I forgot what I was saying now. Your rents are generally higher than market rent with a view to negotiate. Look, if we give a section 13 notice and say to a tenant, we would like your rent to increase from X to Y, it is currently still in place that the tenant can say, I don't believe that that is fair, and they can challenge it, and they can ask for, it can go to a tribunal. touch wood, I've had two tenants argue when I've increased the rent. The first one, actually, I use the word argue, but it's not the case. This is in 10 years, by the way. I've had people have a little moan and then they check the local market rent and realise theirs is in line and then they shush very quietly. Because twice we've had one, a tenant who had been in the property since before we'd even purchased it. We must have owned it about 4 or 5 years, incremental increases, very small increases annually to keep in line with market rent. And the tenant responded by saying, is there any chance we can meet in the middle because I'm going to struggle with that rent increase? It was a £50 per month rent increase we suggested, and the tenant said, I'm going to struggle with it. Is there any chance I can pay a £25 per month rent increase? Similar to Manisha earlier on, this is a tenant who is paid on time, all of the time, looks after the property, no issues anytime we've done an inspection. And so we agreed, £25 rather than £50, and there'll be another increase next year. And that was 2 years ago, another increase this year, no issues. We had one tenant argue the rent increase. Then we said, if you're not happy, we totally appreciate it. If you feel the need to take it to tribunal, you're absolutely fine to do so because we're in line with market rent. However, we'll make you aware, Mr. Tenant, that if the tribunal finds in your favour, your rent will increase to whatever they dictate. But if the rent tribunal finds in our favour, your rent will increase, and they can actually increase it higher than we have suggested. The tenant then went away, had a look at local rental rates and identified that actually it was just about £5 or £10 under market rent, and he still lives in that property. Let's not make mountains out of molehills. That's number 3. Number 4, the decent home standard. I think this is I nearly swore, a fabulous inclusion to the Renters' Rights Bill. We should be providing decent homes to our tenants anyway. Now, yes, there are going to be more enforcement powers. We'll come to that a little bit later on. But we should be providing our tenants with good quality homes anyway. I only think this is a concern for those landlords who are out there, who are, the few ruining it for the many, the ones who don't care about the tenants, the ones who don't repair things as they become broken, the ones who don't do inspections on their properties on a regular basis. And oh my word, I am having so many I agree in the chat box. All 4 Awab's law come into place for very good reason. A poor 2-year-old boy, who passed away in horrific conditions. If you can't provide decent standard of homes for your tenants, you should not be an investor anyway. I kind of don't feel the need to labour the point for number 4. Decent home standard, I think, is a great thing. I can't wait to see this being brought in with council properties also, though. However, my view is, it's my house, it's your home. If we're made aware of issues, and yes, sometimes you'll get an issue that isn't really an issue. A tenant wants to, and I made the fatal error of having a read of Facebook earlier on. I went down the rabbit warren on a landlord portal, where a landlord was complaining because their tenant had moved in and 2 weeks later they'd complained that things needed doing, repairs needed doing. And my first thought is, if it needs repairs, do them. And she was like, but now the repairs aren't repairs. The tenant wants me to move out the fitted wardrobes that were in place. Did the tenant view the property? If so, tough. I'm not saying be mean, but let's make sure that we've got good ventilation. Oh, and also, top tip, for every one of our tenants, we also issue them with one of our guides that we've created, which is a mould and condensation guide. The mould and condensation guide tells them, don't dry clothes on the radiators, open the trickle vents on the windows. If your bathroom has an extractor fan, please make sure that it's in use. Open windows regularly when you have the heating on every now and again, blah, blah, blah. Always, keep your furniture a couple of inches away from the wall to allow ventilation and circulation of air. Because sometimes it's the landlord's responsibility and fault, and sometimes it's the tenant's fault. And so we work together. All of this comes to communication. We want our tenants to live in nice homes. We want our tenants to look after said homes. Let's create a cycle with decent homes. Are you with me, by the way? If number 4 makes sense, the number 4 in the chat box. Well, they're coming in super thick and fast. Okay, won't labour that point. Number 5, the ombudsman and the database. Now, this one I have a bit of an issue with. I have a bit of an issue because there's going to be a private rental sector ombudsman. I have no issues with that. I have no issues with there being an ombudsman in any industry because there should be recourse. However, the database listing landlords and those who've done things right and done things wrong, I kind of having it. I get it. I get the principle of it. Tenants want to live in safe homes. My view is when you're doing one for landlords, can you create one for tenants, please? Can we all have a central database that tells us, Mr. Smith or Mrs. Jones are an absolute nightmare tenant and don't pay on time? That's not in the course, but the reality is a central database and a central ombudsman is coming in. But there's no difference for many of us, because if you have HMOs and you are a HMO landlord on a licensed property, you've already got to be a part of the ombudsman anyway, and you also will have to have a license and feature on the license. If you are in an area where you have selective licensing, as we do in Liverpool, in many different areas, and there are 5 different council areas surrounding Merseyside, there's already these selective licenses where we pay for a license. Now, my only concern with this, and I did raise it with the NRLA, the National Residential Landlords Association, was will we have to pay for the localised ombudsman and database for the licensing and for a national, or will one replace the other? And the answer was we don't know yet. And this therein lies my point. A lot of these things that are being brought in, many don't even have a definitive date yet. So yes, October onwards, but we don't have definitive dates. So number 5, there being an ombudsman and a database. It is, someone's put a TripAdvisor for landlords and another mean of taking payment. Chris, I couldn't agree more. This is purely a pay us a fee to be a landlord. We're already paying fees elsewhere. But if we try and find the positive in any potential negative, and I'm a believer that we should already do that, is this not going to cut the wheat from the chaff? Those who aren't willing to pay the licence and those who aren't good landlords, they're going to move on. We're creating opportunities, because I'm going to come to that in a second. If number 5 makes sense, that it's coming in whether we like it or not, and we get on board or we don't, just put a number 5 in the chat box. Oh my word, it's 20 to 8 already. Time is flying. If you are enjoying this, if you are learning something new, and if you're seeing things from a different perspective, please just give me a yes in the chat box. It just gives me the opportunity to have a drink. I'm with you, Grant. Awesome, loads of yeses. Oh, my pleasure, Mark, my pleasure. Okay. Refreshing to hear a more positive take on it. Thank you, Kirsten. My husband wouldn't always class me as positive, but I'm taking it. Okay, so then the next one, number 6. Someone mentioned this earlier on. Pets. Okay, what about them? Now, I sound like I'm being facetious. I allow pets in all of my properties. So currently, and by the way, this is in existence already, we should not be discriminating against anybody with pets. We should not be advertising with a blanket ban on pets. That is in existence now. The renters reform, coming in or not, is irrelevant. That's already in. Now, in addition, the change in legislation is that we just cannot distinctly say we disallow pets. Well, my view on this is, and there's already people in the chat box saying it, Justin, I'm with you. Well, things change post-COVID anyway. But if we look at it, and there are lots of landlords out there who do not allow pets in their properties or try not to allow pets, and they are just literally sending those tenants your way. And in addition to that, when it comes to pets, you can request that there is pet insurance in place for said pet. We don't bother with this. We vet our, because what we think is, if there are landlords out there who are going to, whether they do it intentionally or not, discriminate against people with pets, i.e., let's say 10 people apply for the property, 8 have pets and 2 don't. The landlords could, if they choose to, just identify that the last 2 just happen to be the best options anyway. But my view is, if people don't like tenants to move in with pets, they've got a smaller pool of properties to move into. They move into your property, they're unlikely to move out. They tend to stay longer. Exactly at that point, Carol says the same. Tenants with pets stay longer. Maybe no pets in a leasehold flat, depends what the lease says. Pets in flats are prevented under the lease. Not all leases, John, but definitely worthwhile looking at. And let's remember that not every house is freehold, so there may be stipulations within the lease. So yeah, tenant inspections, having a fuss and play with their dogs. Thomas really likes it. So There is no change in so much as we should not be discriminating against those with pets anyway. But my view is, if there are lots of people who won't allow pets, people it gives me a broader pool of tenants for me to view and choose from. It does the same for you. In addition to that, let's think post-COVID, how many people got pets, cats, dogs, etc. We got a dog. We got a dog in, when was it? 2022. Um, we've had a dog our whole lives. People tend to move in and never move out if they have a pet. Now, obviously, we've got to be realistic. We can actually stipulate that any additional pets, it can say in the tenancy agreement, they must, inform you before any additional pets. We've got to be logical about it. If you're in a sixth floor flat and they've got a dog and no garden, no balcony, well, for the welfare of the pet, we can be realistic in who we choose. So therefore, yes, we should be allowing pets. We can still choose the best potential tenant for the property, and they happen to be someone. It's just from an advertising perspective. So if you want to allow pets, allow pets. If you don't want to allow pets, unfortunately, you can't discriminate, but you may still happen to choose tenants who don't have pets, and that may be coincidence more than anything else. My view is let them move in. They'll never move out as long as they're paying the rent on time, as long as they're looking after the property, and we take a 5-week deposit on every property, irrespective of who is in there. We lodge that, and we also do a full inventory inspection upon moving. We will do some more inspections, and we'll do them more regularly to make sure, and we'll highlight it again, coming back to communication with your tenants. It's not very difficult. The more you communicate, the better it will be. What if they request to have a pet when they've been living there a few years? James, we've had exactly this. The addition of pets is notifiable. So in the tenancy agreement, it just stipulates if you plan to get a pet in the property, you must inform your landlord. Most tenancy agreements will stipulate this anyway. Now, would I refuse? No. Would we make sure that we're aware of it and ask, is it suitable for the size of the property, how many getting, etc.? Then yes. And would we likely do inspections a bit more frequently at the start of the, after the pet's been moved into the property? Yes. If number 6 and the fact that we shouldn't be discriminating against pets anyway, if this makes sense, please put a number 6 in the chat box. Loads of number 6 coming in, thick and fast there already. Okay, and then the final one I'm going to identify on this one is enforcement powers. There are enforcement powers in these legislations. If your house isn't fitting the decent home standard, then you could be potentially liable for big bills, big penalties, £7,000 plus. The enforcement powers of the ability to come into the properties from local councils, etc. I'm not a big fan of. However, if we are vetting the properties, the tenants really, really well, and if you're doing periodic inspections, mid-term inspections, you do a full inventory upon move in, a full inventory upon move out if the tenant moves out, and you're doing inspections in the midst, then decent homes shouldn't be a concern, and in turn the enforcement powers shouldn't be a concern. Are there likely to be some people who abuse it? Yes, absolutely. But if we go all of the way back to the beginning of vetting your tenants really well, making sure that you communicate really efficiently with them, taking rent and legal guarantee insurance and or a homeowning guarantor or both, and communicating effectively with your tenant should mean you'll never be in a position where the enforcement powers actually affect you. We even had a situation where a tenant had complained to the council, it was in a licensable area, complained to the council that they had a mould issue. We could prove that it had never been reported to the letting agency who were managing the property at the time, and the tenant was the one who got in trouble for it, because actually in the tenancy agreement it states failure to report issues which cause further damage, which this did, mould, leaks, water, ingress, that the cost can be passed to the tenant. So we requested that the council come out and do an inspection, because herein lies the problem. We'll be paying to be on these databases. I'm on my soapbox now. We'll be paying to be on the database. In addition to paying to be on the database as a fit and proper person and a good landlord, it will stipulate that there will be inspections that can happen where the tenants can request an inspection from the council, or the council can enforce their access to go and see it. Good. then reward me for being a good landlord because we look after our tenants. So if you're doing regular inspections, if you are doing decent maintenance, if you are making sure the property is in good condition, then number 7 shouldn't be a concern to you. Feel free to waltz on into any one of my properties and see what's happening in them, because if we do it right, we are setting the tone for all good landlords out there. If that makes sense, if number 7 makes sense, that it actually shouldn't be a concern if you're doing things correctly. I haven't even asked for it yet, but all the 7s are coming in. Look, the reason I say all of this is that all of these changes within the Renters Reform Bill actually create opportunity. And the biggest opportunities that they are going to create are as follows. Oh, EPC standards, sorry. Someone did ask me about EPC standards. Okay, so I've been standing on stages at our multiple streams of property income event for years. And when Rishi Sunak, let's think how far back that goes. Rishi Sunak is the one who said, come 2025, every property in the UK must be an EPC rating of A, B or C. D or beyond, we can't rent it out. And as soon as that was identified, let's be honest, why do the government stipulate these things? To get in power. And then when they get in power, they kick the can down the road. Because I stood on stage at our multiple streams of property income event, and I know some of you in the chat box have been there, and I said they are going to kick they're going to kick the can down the road, because lots of properties will not reach an A, B or C given their current standards and given the build construction types. But also the council would then have to adhere to this for their rental properties. They're going to kick the can down the road. And they did exactly that. So they've kicked the can down the road. So my view is, when we buy a property, we refurbish it and we get it to an A, B or C. Now, there are going to be some properties potentially where with your standard refurb, you can't do an A, B or C EPC rating. Well, one, this is going to mean you can buy those properties reduced. 2, if they are D, E or an F and they are currently legal to rent out, there are so many incentives coming out. We've utilised some. Tenants on benefits can get utilisation to get cladding external to the property, or solar panels on the roof, or internal insulation. Those who are not on benefits, there are government bodies that are literally giving you grants to be able to bring these properties back to life. And I genuinely think they're going to kick the can down the road again. And the reason I say that is these properties are still going to remain at a lower EPC rating. And while we have such a shortage of housing in the UK, the government are going to have to jump on board with it, whether it be that there are changes that they make in terms of what, because there's also talk of changing where the bandings lie. So the current A, B and C may not be the current A, B and C. And what I mean by that is those that are currently a rating of a D, I can't remember the number off the top of my head because they all have numbers, would actually fall into a category of a C. So get this, the government might move the goalposts. Who knew? Not like it's ever happened before, let's be honest. It's been there in number 10 anyway. Now, Charles, yes, 10 Downing Street didn't comply with the EPC rating. You looked it up years ago. There you go. 10 Downing Street doesn't comply with it. Basically, and I love this, Mendoga says in the chat box, none of this is anything to worry about for good landlords, only for the landlords who don't care about the property being in a high standard. Like, EPC ratings do not concern me. They will kick the can down the road. It's more of a concern, not for those that you buy going forward, but for those retrospectively. And just like when they said every EPC had to be a rating of A, B or C by 2025 before they kick the can down the road, most people didn't read that it also stipulated, but current tenancy agreements have until 2027 to rectify this. Nobody really read that. They just hear what's said on the news and take it as gospel. So will they then give some leniency? Will it then be the £15,000 limit on what we can spend on fees? Will we potentially get some support? Absolutely. And if not, they are the properties that will hit the market. They will be reduced properties, creating opportunities. If all of this is making sense, please just give me a yes in the chat box. I need a drink. Been on this soapbox. Look, I'm going to stay around and answer questions and share with you my thoughts on the remainder of all of this. But I suppose my question to you is, if you would like to learn more around property investing, if you would like to understand